time from the Meat and Potatoes radio show. And we're off. So here we are in Worcester yet again on another Thursday night, and it is live from Worcester with the Worcester team. So we have a wonderful program tonight devoted to ladies in politics. We have both Jen and Cassie from the Governor's Council, and we have Karen Anderson, our state rep, and they'll be talking about the experiences they've had on the campaign trail and what they can share with us and help inspire people to step up and take that vote. Now, as is our tradition, we will all ask everyone to be upstanding, and we will pledge allegiance, and we'll ask Jen, come on up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without much further ado, we are going to start off with Jen. She'll be our first speaker, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the Governor's Council, who judges the judges, as you might have noticed, and also about her campaign. So, thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with all of you. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I recognize Joe McKenna, our state representative, who represents Webster, Oxford, Douglas, Sutton. Joe's joining us, and it was nice to walk in and I see many familiar faces here. But Gary Anderson, Gary, it's so nice to see you. We walked in together. I haven't seen Gary in years. I remember our days back in the State House when Gary was an aide for Representative Paul Frost, and I came on as a summer intern, and we met then and we worked together then. Gary, 1997, 1998, so we'll go back. Our first ran for selectman in '97. You're right. Gary was so helpful to me. Brad Wyatt, Karen, nice to see you here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I was reelected in November to the Governor's Council, and I am now in my third term. It's hard for me to believe that. I don't know if we have a cross section in the room. I'm the only Republican on the council. And I was the first Republican re-elected to the council in 2012, making me the first Republican to be re-elected to the council since 1964, when Margaret Heckler was re-elected. And we all know she went on to serve as the ambassador to Ireland under the Reagan administration, so I can only hope for a Republican in 2016. Enjoyed my time on the council since I was elected in November of 2010, and let me just briefly touch upon what it is the council does and what I've been doing since 2010 as the lone Republican up there. The council is a constitutional body that's been around since the founding of our country. It was written into the Massachusetts Constitution, which predates the United States Constitution by some of our founding fathers, including John Adams. The council consists today of 8 members. We are elected from our respective districts. I represent the 7th district, which consists primarily of Worcester County proper, but also includes some other communities in 3 other counties. So I have 65 cities and towns in my district. I had 68 when I was first elected in 2010. I lost a few, one of which was Warwick, which we lost. Warwick was one of the 5 communities we lost in 2010 by like 15 votes. I had declared war on Warwick after November 2010, but then I didn't have to go after it because it was redistricted out. So right now I have 65 cities and towns in my district, and if you can imagine the districts from east to west throughout the Commonwealth, I'm in the 7th, 8th would be Springfield and Western Massachusetts. So that's my district. What does the Governor's Council do? That was a question I answered again and again and again when I first ran for this position, and still so many people have never heard of it and they don't know what our body does. The primary role of the Governor's Council is to be the final confirmation of any and all judges who take the bench in Massachusetts. And we know that judges in Massachusetts are appointed for life. We also, the final approval of all clerk magistrates, again, they can serve for life as well. And one of the decisions that we make that has really come to the forefront, that is I would say is equally important as the appointments of the judges, is the final approval of all members of the Massachusetts Parole Board. And we know that the Massachusetts Parole Board was on the front page of so many newspapers here in the Commonwealth, and on the 7 o'clock news and the 5 o'clock news, in Fox News, after Dominic Sinelli shot and killed Officer John Jack McGuire in Woburn, and that hold up in a shopping mall the day after Christmas. And that sparked a lot of outrage, and rightfully so, in my opinion. Dominic Sinelli was an individual serving 3 life sentences who was voted to be paroled by the Massachusetts Parole Board. I was not a member of the council when any of the members of the parole board were approved. 5 members were sacked as a result of that killing, and I was proud to take part in the appointment of 5 new members. I was the tie-breaking vote, a 5-4 vote to put a victim's rights advocate on the parole board. And I thought it was a no-brainer, but when you go up into that echo chamber on Beacon Hill, and Joe, you'll attest to this, and Brad, you've been up there enough, and Karen, you know too, because that's why you ran. They thought that my position was, off the wall, that it was some, west of 128 Appalachia idea to have a victim's rights advocate on the Massachusetts Parole Board, and I stood up loud and proud. I justified my vote, I stood by my vote, and she's still on the Massachusetts Parole Board today. So now you have a different makeup of the Massachusetts Parole Board. You can just imagine, really matter of life and death when you think about the McGuire family, a woman who was about ready to retire, a father, a husband, a brother, an uncle, gunned down like that by somebody who never should have been voted to be paroled. And then, of course, you hear about all the missteps, the fact that you had people on the parole board. The chairman of the parole board at the time of the Sinelli murder was our previous governor's driver during his campaign. Now, he was a police officer, but he was his driver during the campaign, and I guess that made him qualified to chair the Massachusetts Parole Board. So, I was proud to take part in the 5 votes to replace the majority of the members of the parole board. And those are the primary duties of the Governor's Council. We also approved notary publics, and I guess if you're a Justice of the Peace, do we have any JPs in the room? That's a very important thing if you are a JP, with the final approval of the JPs. But the way I like to describe it when I get on a stage and I'm told I have 30 seconds to speak, which is normally the case, right? Any of the candidates in the room. I used to get up when I was first running and say, my 30 seconds, I have 2 black labs, one's name is Reagan and the other one's name is Lincoln, and I'd walk off the stage, and that seemed to be enough because I won. But now I like to say that when I describe the council, I like to say that we are the guardians at the gates of justice, because nobody becomes a judge in Massachusetts, nobody becomes a clerk magistrate, and they're very important to our justice system. Nobody sits on the Massachusetts Parole Board without a majority vote in the Governor's Council. And what's been going on since 2010, I'll just give you a snapshot. I'll try to tell the story. I think it really encompasses all of the changes and the hard work, at least that I've been proud to be part of. I don't do it alone, there are 7 other members. Prior to me taking my seat in January of 2011, there had not been a single nominee defeated, whether it be a judge, a nominee for a judgeship, clerk magistrate, member of the parole board. There hadn't been a single nominee defeated in 5 years. There hadn't been a tie in 5 years. So you can imagine hundreds of nominees coming through, not a single tie, meaning it was a close vote, was this person qualified, not a single nominee defeated. And since I took my seat in January of 2011, we have had 11 ties on nominees, and 6 nominees have been defeated, and that's as the only Republican. So I think what that means is the volume, the accountability volume, has been turned up on the Governor's Council in a way that I think it's serving the public as it was intended to by our founding fathers. So I'm proud of that. I've got some pretty conservative Democrats on the council who weren't afraid to raise a little havoc for the Patrick administration. We really had them scrambling at one point, particularly after the Lieutenant Governor resigned abruptly. You remember the NASCAR incident? In all due respect, I'm glad he was okay. He actually came in that day, and we didn't know what had happened, and he just looked like he had been in a terrible ordeal, and I didn't know anything about the accident. So Thankfully for him and his family, he was okay. So I make light of that. He actually wore a NASCAR suit to the Irish breakfast in Boston, so I thought that was safe to say. But when he resigned the position, what that meant was, when we used to have ties, because conceivably you could have a tie, there are 8 members of the council, 4 and 4. And what would happen in that case is the governor would have to come into our chamber, and the lieutenant governor would pass the gavel to him, and for purposes of breaking the tie, the lieutenant governor was allowed to vote. So when you don't have a lieutenant governor anymore, and you don't have a provision in the Massachusetts Constitution for the replacement of a lieutenant governor, you go for however long it takes to the next election without a lieutenant governor. So in those 11 instances where we would loop the ties, where we lost votes 5-4, a 4-4 vote fails. So we really had a unique opportunity in the last year, 14 months of this administration to make a difference and make sure that we were getting the best caliber of candidates. And to the administration's credit, it was pretty obvious that the caliber of nominees went up when they realized that we were going to start blocking some of these people and vetting them very thoroughly. So that's what I've been doing since 2011 when I took my seat. I'm looking forward to the new administration, working with Karen and Charlie. Lieutenant Governor Polito will be chairing our assemblies now every Wednesday, and so far so good. She's done a good job. And I'm looking forward to the nominees that Governor Baker puts forward. But as I said back in 2010 when I ran, I don't intend on being a rubber stamp for a Republican or a Democrat. These are far too important appointments for the public. So,
Amen.
Somebody say amen? I thought they said the end. Told me I could speak for 20 minutes. On that note. So now I just want to touch base on my campaign, my experiences, and what I thought was important to win back in 2010. When I first decided to run, I asked my now husband, he was my fiance at the time, you know, honey, what do you think about me running for governor's council? He's a pretty smart guy, WPI grad, he's a VP of his company. He said, what's the governor's council? And we were out to dinner, and I made sure he had a few drinks before I brought it up. And so I explained to him and why I thought it was important. It was actually a seat I had looked at when I first graduated from law school back in 1998. It was a seat that I was passionate about. My law school thesis was about a victim's rights amendment that was currently pending in the United States Congress at the time. An amendment that didn't pass, but it was an amendment that was sponsored by John Kyle of Arizona, who nobody would call a liberal, and Dianne Feinstein from California, who nobody would call a conservative. So it had to be a good piece of legislation, right? It was an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would give victims basically the same rights that criminal defendants have, you know, the right to remain silent, the right to a speedy trial. It was a dignity bill for victims, which does not exist under our federal system, so every state is like a patchwork of different rights for victims. So, in any event, I was very passionate about it. I was going to run for the seat in 1998. I decided not to do that. So here we are in 2010, we're having dinner, and you know, my husband's a little edgy about it, he doesn't know what it is, I tell him what it is. He says, okay, he has no idea what we are in for the next 10 months, zero. I mean, to this day, we just sigh when we think about it, in a good way. So, we started out with no money. I had notions about what the position was and why I was running and why it was important to me. But we didn't really have a platform hammered out, and we had no organization. So from there, we started to reach out to some people that we trusted. And meanwhile, what I did was I grew into my passion. I knew why I wanted to run, but I needed to flush it out. So when I went around and I spoke to people in the district, I could say, look, this is my message, this is why I'm running. And I wanted it to be sincere. And so when I delivered it, I didn't have to read off a page. I knew what I wanted to say because it was important to me. So I started to surround myself with people who had great skills. Marla Zaneski, she's in the room. She was great with my tech, my camera. She took great pictures of me. She put them up on Facebook. She's a great writer, so I would always use her to proof my literature, my handouts. Justin Brooks from Leominster came on board. He was my North County guy originally, but then he became my campaign manager when my other guy quit. I guess I wasn't paying him enough. Guy. So I surrounded myself with people who all brought something to the table. I immersed myself in why I wanted to run for this position and why it was important, the history of it. And off we went. We had some small fundraisers to start out with because we didn't have a budget. I went around to some of the local community leaders that I had worked with as a selectman and asked for their financial support. Meanwhile, you know, I'm an attorney by practice, so I'm in court every day, and my opponent who announced before me, Francis Ford, was the former clerk of courts, well-known, well-established attorney, big name in the city, all kinds of money flowing in from Boston lawyers, and, you know, he was on his way. And as a former athlete, whenever I get into any type of contest, whether it's a case, whether it's a political issue, you know, you try to be honest with yourself and identify what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, because you want to use that information to attack your opponent, whether it's on the basketball court, whether it's in the courtroom, or whether it's on a stage on a political issue. So that was one of the things that we did, and we said, look, you know, he's a little older than me. He has an AARP card, I don't. He's a little shorter than me, so a little less hair than I do. So you know where we're going with this. So I say, hey, look, let's put a name with a face, and let's work our tails off. Let's use the energy and enthusiasm that we have, the fact that I was most certainly an underdog, and we knew that, to energize people, to bring our message together, and try to put together a campaign that we thought would work against a lot of odds. Some name recognition in South County, but not the type of name recognition in the city of Worcester that my opponent had, not the type of money that he had, or the organization that he had. And what I would say to anybody who's going to run, even a phenomenon that's occurred, I'd say over the last 5 years, Worcester County has fundamentally changed geographically, as far as we're red. We're a red county. We tend to be more conservative, and even more conservative Democrats, whether you're a Republican, more undecided people who tend to vote conservative or vote Republican. And I think that was something that my opponent relied on, and some folks who have since lost those countywide seats on the Democratic side, they relied on it in a way that if they won the city of Worcester, it was game, set, match. And we said no. From a strategy standpoint, we identified the district and we said, look, we can get crushed in Worcester by, you know, no more than 20,000 votes, and still win this thing if we do well in Auburn and Leominster and Fitchburg and Milford. So we identified the communities that we needed to win. That wasn't done right off the bat, but it was certainly done in short order after we put our committee together. So whoever's thinking about running, it's so important to know your audience, basically. It's a long way of saying know your audience. Know your district. Understand that you can lose some areas in your district, but if you win others, you're going to be okay. So that was an important part of the campaign. Identifying his weaknesses, our strengths, and then identifying our weaknesses and putting it together in a package, really, with a message, with signs that were very effective, with a strategy with respect to the geography of the district. My husband was a little anal about that as an engineer. He was very helpful because he had this software. So what we did, he would put it up, you know, he'd put it up on his big screen, and we put a big sign with your picture on it here, and we put one here, and he just dissected the county in a way that was really impressive and effective. Because, you know, halfway through the campaign, people were saying, your signs are everywhere, you are everywhere, from Ware to Clinton to Milford to Fitchburg, and it was because of the sign location. It was a strategy. It wasn't that we had all kinds of money, because we didn't. And money's important, but I would never let it be, and I would hope anybody who's interested in running wouldn't let it be the final say or decision issue as to whether or not they're going to run. It should not make or break a person's decision. We ran a campaign, 68 cities in town campaign, on $33,000. My opponent spent $110,000, and we beat him in 63 of the 68 cities and towns. that's why, you know, when you're thinking about running, sometimes people get wrapped up in the momentum. It sounds great, it's a lot of fun, and, you know, you like the attention that goes with it, and you're out there and you're meeting new people, but there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes, and if you can sit down and put this type of stuff together, what's my message? What are my signs gonna look like? Who are the good people I can surround myself with if I don't have a ton of money to do the things that I need to do? And the other thing is the energy. We went to, I wanna say this, and I think I'm accurate saying it, Marlene, tell me, we went to every city and town in the district. I don't think that there was a community that we did not go to. I didn't know that there was a garlic festival in Orange until I ran for office. You know? And I'll tell you, there wasn't a meat raffle we didn't go to, whether it's in Ware or Clinton or Charlton. And you know, and that's all part of the geography and understanding your district. Because what we found was there were so many groups of people that were untouched or not tapped into as far as a voting block. For example, the sportsmen and women. I mean, Worcester County, I can't even tell you how many sports clubs there are. There are 2 lists of them. I mean, I had 2 lists, and we went to all of them. And we talked about the Second Amendment because that's important to me. That was a very important constitutional issue for me. So my opponent wasn't going to meat raffles. He wasn't going to rod and gun clubs. He was going to country clubs. And that was fine because I was running a Joe Six-Pack campaign, and that's what people could relate to. And I wasn't running, you know, I recall one event we had in Southbridge. It was a Democrat, it was Geraldo Alicia. He was the state rep at the time. He was gracious enough to let me speak because I'd worked with him when I was a selectman. So my opponent got up and said, I know the difference between a turkey and a clown, and I won't put turkeys on the bench, thank you. Or something really flippant, and I was just like, so I got up and I said, this is what the Governor's Council is, this is why it's so important. And I explained it and what my issues were, public safety, victims' rights, and I had 3 issues, and accountability. And I just hammered that issue away everywhere I went, and he just went around telling jokes. And you know, at some point, probably in October, I think he knew it was over. And you know, it's the going to all the events and not letting any votes go. So you go to the rod and gun clubs, you go to the meat raffles, you go to some of the Democratic events, because guess what? You know what? You probably have some votes there too. You don't rule anything out. You know, I was kind of a centrist candidate. I mean, there are some things that I don't compromise on, like victims' rights. I don't know if people who hurt and molest and abuse children can be rehabilitated. I really have, I have very little tolerance for that. I guess I would be a hammer if I were a judge in those particular cases. So I have a very small, little tolerance for certain issues, but in a lot of ways I ran a centrist campaign because I listened to people and I didn't rule out going after Democratic votes. I didn't say I'm a Republican, I can't go to those events. Because just like anything, whether it's business, whether it's your job, whether it's politics, 90% of our lives, whether we're successful, whether we're happy, is about relationships at the end of the day. It really is. And that was something I was always mindful. I mean, one of the best stories regarding going into enemy camp, I guess, as a Republican was they had the union campaign, candidates forum. Jim, you probably, I don't know if you remember, they have it at Leo's. Honest to God, I was the only Republican. I was hanging out with Joe Early and whoever else didn't run from me. I was in the corner of the room. They had all the unions here, the nurses union, this union, that union. My opponent was there, Harriet Chandler. I mean, everybody on the other side of the political aisle. And they let me get up and speak. And my opponent got up, and I don't know what he was even talking about, the courthouse construction. I couldn't even follow what he was saying. He didn't even talk about the position. He talked about how much money they spent on the new courthouse, and I thought he was running for a city planner or something. So I got up, and I talked about victims' rights and how safe neighborhoods isn't a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue, it's a people issue. We all want safe neighborhoods for our families to grow up in. I have no doubt I walked out of that room with some votes. A couple of my Democratic friends on the other side came up to me and said, Jen, we got bad news. you didn't get the nurse's endorsement, you didn't get this endorsement, you didn't get the plumbers, you didn't get the electrician. I said, I know that, I'm not here to get endorsements, I'm here for votes. And I know I walked out of there with some votes. So, you know, if anybody's gonna do this, it's a global strategy insofar as message, energy, surround yourself with good people, make sure the advertisement is effective, and really just focus on what your principles are, what your issues are, and be open-minded about some things. Don't be a sellout, that's for sure. That's not what my message is. But, you know, if you're going to do it and do it right, you get up and you speak to the people about what's important. You speak from your heart, and you be passionate about it. And you be open-minded. If you don't know an answer, you know, just say, I don't know the answer to that. And get out there and work your tails off if this is something. I mean, I would say that if somebody said, what were the 3 most important things that we did? It was the energy that we had, it was the message that we had, and it was the good people that we had around us. And at the end of the day, if you're not out there working hard and having fun, you have to have fun. I mean, there's some stories I can't tell you about. I'm taking the 5th. But
You can tell us after the camera.
I'll tell you yeah, when they shut those cameras off. But you have to have some fun too, because if you're out there doing it for all the right reasons, it should be fun, it should be rewarding. So.